Hi everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm making a fantasy overdress for my Littlefee to go with the underdress I shared last time. I started before I realized my camera's battery was dead, so you can see I've already started with the skirt, folding the edge over once, and then over again to create a rolled hem on both the bottom and sides. If you need the pattern for this dress, you can find it in my pattern archive, linked in the video description. So let's get started. Once your hems are folded, sew them down. You can run your stitches all the way off the fabric and cut it loose if you want, but I usually just backstitch at the corners before and after I turn the piece to make sure the stitches reach the edges. If you watched the tutorial for the underdress last time, you already know my trick for quick ruffles, switching to a long stitch and pinching the top thread to increase the tension. Do this along the top edge of the skirt. We'll need to make these gathers a little tighter, so single out the top thread and pull it to make the gathers a little closer together. Now we'll assemble the bodice. Starting with your chosen fabric, pin the front and back with right sides together and sew the shoulder seams. Mine's a little off on one side, so I'll need to fix that. I'll go ahead and sew the lining in the same way. You can switch thread colors for this if you want. I'm not going to because it doesn't really show. Before we go any farther, you'll want to press your bodice and lining so the shoulder seams are open like this. It'll make it easier to turn the piece later. If you're wondering what's up with the ink all over my hands, I got in a fight with my printer earlier and I lost. After they're pressed, put your fabric and lining with right sides together and sew the neckline closed. These small curves are always difficult on machines, so you may prefer to do these parts by hand. Once the neck curve is sewn, clip the curve to ensure it will lay flat when turned right side out. You want to be sure to turn your bodice right side out to check how it lays, because once you do the next step, it's super hard to make changes. When you're happy with how it lays, flip the bodice wrong side out again and sew the arm side closed. This is the easiest method of closing the shoulder, so it's all I'll show in this video so that it stays beginner friendly. The hardest part of this dress is what comes next, turning the bodice through the shoulder. There are a couple ways to approach it. I find it easiest to use tweezers to grab the fabric, pushing it through and pulling it out the other side, moving just a little at a time. This is the most gentle on your fabric, but it takes forever. You can also use the safety pin to guide the fabric through the narrow shoulder. It's best to use one like this that doesn't have a coil at the back, so the fabric can't get caught in it. Run the pin through the fabric, then feed the pin through the tunnel of the shoulder until it comes out the other side. When you can grab it, you can pull it all the way through, bringing the fabric with it. Or you can take the push approach, using something like a capped ballpoint pen. Just shove it through until you see the fabric start to come through the other side. Once you can get hold of the fabric, you can pull it the rest of the way through. No matter what method you pick, it might take a little effort since the space is so narrow, so be sure to take your time. After the shoulders are finished, it's time to close the sides of the bodice. Line the open side of the front up with the side of the back, pinning the front lining to the back lining and the front fabric to the back fabric, with right sides together. Sew it closed, then we'll complete the front edge of the bodice. All you have to do for this piece is fold the front wrong side out again so that the fabric and lining are right sides together. Then sew the front edge. When you go to trim your threads, you can get a neater corner on the front of the dress by clipping the corner of the seams. Sew both sides closed the same way, and you'll end up with a finished bodice like this. Next, we'll attach the bodice to the skirt. Pin the fabric of the bodice to the skirt with right sides together. I like to start by pinning both corners and then arranging the gathers so they all fit. Folding back the lining lets you sew this seam by machine. Just be careful to make sure the lining stays back so you don't accidentally sew it into the skirt. It's easy to lose the pins and the ruffles too, so be careful not to hit any. Clip your threads and then turn the bottom edge of the lining inside the bodice. It should fall right along the seam where the skirt is attached. Oops, missed a thread. You can sew this by machine, but I prefer to attach it by hand so there aren't any visible stitches. Sew the lining down however you prefer for your dress. Last of all, we'll add eyelets for the front lacing. I use scrapbooking eyelets, but if you don't have any, you can also make tiny buttonholes or sew jump rings from jewelry supplies onto the front of the dress. There are two ways to make holes for the eyelets. The most durable method is to use an awl to poke a hole through the fabric without breaking any threads. I've used a knitting needle for this before too. It can be difficult to get the eyelet through both layers of fabric, but it's a great option if you don't have a punch. For this dress, I'm just going to use a leather punch to make holes through the fabric. It's a good idea to make your hole a little smaller than the eyelet itself. I punch a hole, poke the eyelet through, and then use a Crop-A-Dile multi-tool to set it. And that's it! Now the dress is ready to layer over the underdress we made before. I use ribbon to lace the front, and everything is finished. Isn't it cute? It matches Lulu's eyes. If you make something with this pattern, make sure you share it on Instagram with the hashtag #LomiTutorials so I can see the amazing things you've made. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.